Yeah, for sure. Well, it looks like these teams are ready to go. We are here on the first matchup of the day. It's Method NA versus Fly Me Out here on Freehold.
All right, the Unholy Decays are ready to go, and both teams skipping first pack right now, and they're going to be moving on in grabbing everything going into Sky Captain Crag's room.
Alright, yeah, both teams looks like they're doing very similar things. We see some difference in comps. We see a Hunter on Fly Me Outside, while Method and H chose to go with the double DK and the Rogue. I think Rogue is almost always part of the composition in the Freehold, just because of the fact they can stealth forward and start this RP event on the Ring of Booty that we've seen almost all of the Rogues do in their comms. We see Suffer go a little bit low on Fly Me Outside, but did manage to recover actually.
They do end up recovering. Ellesmere drops low as well. This pack is still taking a very long time to die on the side of Fly Me Out, while his Method NA is already on the boss. So I want to show the power of those Unholy DKs right off the bat.
Yeah, and we also see, looks like Method NA might have used their Bloodlust very early on. At least it looks like it's on cooldown now. I'm not really sure if they used it before the key started and the timer is just wrong, or if they really just used it at the very start, because they already are 1 minute 20 off their cooldown, while Fly Me Out used it as soon as they pulled the trash. So interesting to see. We also have to, you can see above the enemy forces, you see the obelisk, like the eye, and you see the number 4. This is about the obelisk and the awakened affix, which means right now there's 4 obelisks still there for both of the teams.
Yeah, we saw a couple times where, I think it was Italdazar most frequently, where teams would just Bloodlust right as the key started so that they could line up the cooldowns the way that they wanted it to. So probably going to be the same out of the side of Method NA, which is probably also a testament to how quickly they can get through this dungeon as well. So I'm just eager to see what's going to be coming next, as Sky Captain Crag's down to 20% on the side of Method NA, as Fly Me Out's working the boss as well, just dropped to low half.
Yeah, some incredible speed by both of these teams. You see both Rogues are still here actually. We've seen some of the EU teams have the Rogue just disappear early and start the event. Doesn't seem like Method NA or Fly Me Out is doing any of those strategies. Shakib dropping really low there. Look like, oh, Shakib actually going down, unfortunately. Not really sure what kind of combination of maybe corruption plus boss mechanics hit him there, but thankfully it was at the very end of the fight, so they didn't have to commit a battle rest, and he could just release immediately after the boss was dead.
That's right, Method NA moving on as Fly Me Out again, still working on cleaning up the rest of the boss, and you know, being able to have the Hunter to drop any of the baits and stuff has been quite nice, but I think it kind of ended up desyncing the bird as well, so we saw a bunch of guano getting dropped on the group. Method NA here just getting into position as they have a ton of mobs going to be getting ready at this point. And I love to see this kind of control. You're seeing, you know, the Rogue speed ahead. Everyone's grabbing all the brews right now, so they're going to be getting rid of some of the more annoying trash mobs as we speak. And Lighty is just grabbing everything and getting ready to run into the Council of Captains.
Yeah, so they are actually engaging the boss with these trash groups without Yoda. Yoda is running off to start that RP event, so interesting to see that they don't even need the Rogue, because they have the DKs who are just going to do up to almost 1 million DPS to deal with this trash. So no need for the Rogue, as they're already fighting the boss here. With 2 packs, you see the amount of damage the DKs are doing to finish this off, and now Yoda is finally back, so he's joining the fight as well.
Yep, and you know, it's as frustrating as it is to be the Rogue and having to do, you know, some of the less than savory jobs at this point. It's the extra control, it's being able to get ahead of the game, really, and the Unholy DKs don't really need that much more help in destroying all of the trash and bringing Ral and Jolly both, you know, extremely low at this point.
Yeah, and you see the brews who are being dropped on the ground, it can either be a haste or crit buff for your team, or also a buff for the mobs, or it can be the bad brew, which leaves behind a dot damage over time effect on mobs but also on players. And for tanks, it's actually specifically important that you have the bosses, as you saw Lighty do there. That's why both of the bosses got finished off, because they got hit by this dot. If the bosses are not positioned properly into those brews, it can definitely cost you a lot of damage. So well done by Lighty here and Method NA to make use of that brew.
Yep, so far, you know, Method NA has not been having anything too terribly fancy throughout this run, and Freehold possible. I think at this point, JB didn't quite have Way of the Crane back available. He does use a quick Essence Font so he can get his Thunder Focus T back more rapidly, and then he just goes in with Way of the Crane. I like that setup as well. Being able to take an extra moment as a healer, make sure that you have the cooldowns at your disposal, and then it's going to be able to start picking up from there, right? It's so important to make sure you're stabilizing the group quickly as Monk, and again, everything's dead as they're almost half on Ludwig von Tortolan.
Yeah, and interesting to see that Lighty was topping the damage here for quite a while, up until the Unholy DKs were able to get their cooldowns back up, were able to do that damage to finish off the trash. And of course, the Rogue, in this specific comp, the Rogue is not really here, as you mentioned before, it's not here to do the most damage, but it's more here to get all of these kind of jobs where you start the RP, you deal with the Self, you deal with Shroud and so on, and that is really the job of the Rogue here. They're not here to do as much damage as an Unholy DK does, of course. In fact, sometimes the Rogue maybe holds back their damage so the Unholy DKs can do their damage, get their faster might stacks to increase their single target damage, while the Rogue itself is just here to finish off the high HP focus targets.
Yeah, we've seen a number of times, that's a great point as well, where we've seen some teams having only one Unholy DK, and there's some dungeons where it's great to have double, right? I think we've seen a number of times where if the mobs just have not really that much HP at all, we've seen a number of times where people just bring one because it's more important to bring more single target in other areas, right? We've seen it, like we're seeing on the side of Fly Me Out, bringing in the Hunter, but Method NA is just pulling so large, and this is what, pull number 3 or 4 or something on the side of Method NA. They're just almost through the dungeon as Trothak's getting pulled with another massive pull right under it. They're going to be like around 70% for trash once it all goes down.
Yeah, and this was a really scary pull because you had Trothak, Plastic Crusher, which both do an AoE around them once in a while, and they had Harpooners on top of it as well. Harpooners are the ones who will grip a ranged target back into the group, and if you're getting gripped in a bad moment when the Crusher does its AoE or when Trothak does its AoE, then you're gonna be in trouble. So well done for finishing this pack before anything bad happened on their side, and a very risky pull as well, as they're now, as you mentioned, on 71%. Neither of the teams have dealt with an obelisk so far, as you can see with the number 4 and the obelisk, the eye above the enemy forces.
At this point, I'm extremely excited to start seeing, the JB running, the JB race, the marathon that we'll be seeing. I assume Ellesmere might do it as well. We've seen some teams opt to kill 3. I think 1 has killed 4, if I'm not mistaken, in an Underrot we saw last week. So
Sure.
Still an option, but I want to see some kiting. I'm ready for some kiting. I don't know about you.
I definitely want to see some kiting as well, but I'm not sure how efficient it is in a Freehold, just because they don't have anything like Bolstering. So theoretically, they could be using the friendly fire damage on the last boss to deal with trash. And we've seen some EU teams already do this, where they go to the last boss with lots of trash that they still need, lots of enemy forces left, and then they will just deal with the awakened mobs, and also on top of that pull trash, and then use the friendly fire from the boss, the artillery, to deal with the trash percentage as well. Now, of course, if your healer is cutting the awakened mobs, then you can't do any of that because you need the healing from the incoming damage on the tank. So we'll see what Method NA does as they now down Trothak.
That's right, and it does look like they are going into the obelisk, so like you mentioned, looks like we're going to be seeing them probably kill 3 and then end up using the cannon at the end to start obliterating the rest of the mobs. We kept seeing a lot of times early on where teams would just be, okay, let's try to grab a bunch of mobs, use the painful motivation, we'll get our kills, we'll be done. And then we started looking at the friendly fire out of Harlan's suite at the very end of the fight, and they're like, this is actually just so much better. The scary pack that everybody would skip around just becomes perfect trash percentage to be killed by the boss itself.
Yeah, and it's also very interesting to see all these different kind of strategies coming out in Freehold. We've seen so many different things that all the teams are doing, even different things that all the teams are doing, even though Freehold seems to be a pretty straightforward dungeon. But those teams, they really can pick and choose what they do. And because there's so many big pulls you can do in Freehold, every little second, every adjustment to your strategy really matters, and it gives you advantages here or there. So it's always very interesting to see how those teams adjust their strat depending on what the affixes are. And this time we really see this non-affix combination almost, because Quaking and Volcanic really is not gonna matter for these teams. So interesting to see what they're doing as they do a skip here, and it seems like they're about to engage the last boss with their Bloodlust available.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned, this is kind of as non-affix as you can possibly get. And they're not even waiting for Harlan Sweet's cannons to go up. They're having all of that pack plus 3 obelisks going up. We haven't seen... Okay, there's the Bloodlust. Was just about to say, we get our Bloodlust going up, big defenses being popped on everybody, and you can just look at the weak aura under everybody's frames right now. You're just seeing every defensive, every cooldown being popped to just obliterate these mobs. And we're already seeing Samrak the Beckoner going down. We're seeing really low HP on the Blood of the Corruptor, and the ad control is absolutely insane on the side of Method NA as they are just mopping the floor with the obelisks.
Yeah, what a crazy pull. And then this is now why now we realize why they used the Bloodlust immediately as soon as the key started, right? Because they reached this point in the dungeon. They keep actually going down, unfortunately. They do have a battle rest available, and they also have a DK who can use that battle rest. They don't need to use the engineering rest. So there we go, they got him back up. And it's only the Void Weaver left, which should not be a big deal for them as they have lots of melee interrupts. So well done by them. Only 1 death on Shakib's side here. They should be able to finish this. They still need 8% trash, which they probably are going to pull later with that friendly artillery though.
Oh, that's the rest of that's just going to be an absolute breeze, and at this point they have time to get all their defenses back, get every other cooldown available, push the boss sub 60, so he'll be firing 4 rounds of cannons instead of just 1. And yep, they're not even worrying about waiting too long as well. They're not even worrying about lining it up with a cannon. At this point, they know what they need. They have all their cooldowns back, and they're just able to go for round 2 and start taking it down. And Lip dropping low there, but they do a great job of spreading quickly for the Quaking while still getting a lot of cannon damage onto those mobs. So very well played by these guys, taking advantage of the entirety of the room. Method NA absolutely tearing through this Freehold. We're at 12 minutes. We're at 12 minutes right now.
This is so fast. They were actually so unlucky with that Quaking timer there, right? They got the cannon barrage on top of Quaking, so that they had to spread out. Usually you want to stay together and then move together to get all of that damage, but they still managed to do the pull anyway with that bad Quaking on top. And yeah, 100% trash, 30% on Harlan Sweet, so they get the increased damage on the boss as well. This boss is gonna melt now and die in no time as they win the first game here against Fly Me Out, who had not too much struggle on their side either. Their whole strategy was just a little bit slower as they haven't even engaged the last boss yet. So 1-0 for Method NA versus Fly Me Out on a 13-minute Freehold.
Oh my goodness, Method NA on a tear.
Just under 13 too. Oh man, what an incredibly efficient run for Method NA. And Dratnos, they just made that look so easy there, especially with that last boss on Freehold.
Yeah, that was like a hot knife through butter. Method NA were just slew every boss and every huge amount of trash onto it with those double death knights. Made it look really, really easy.
They certainly did, and like you guys were saying, Fly Me Out, they had a pretty
it was decent.
Similar run in terms of deaths, and they weren't really struggling too hard. They were just less efficient, Jack. Where was it that they were falling short against Method NA?
I think a lot of it comes down to how aggressive that we're seeing the pulls, right? We saw the immediate bloodlust from Method NA as they started the dungeon, and they ended up pulling another 10-15% more trash at the start of the dungeon. Then we saw it Fly Me Out. And that momentum just continued to grow throughout the dungeon, whether it was on Council of Captains, whether it was, chain pulling into Ludwig, chain pulling into Trothak as well. It was just constant up-tempo, and Method NA showing why they're the #1 seed and why they've been #1 for so long.
Yeah, the performance out of Fly Me Out, though, didn't look like an 8th seed performance. That looked pretty good out of them.
It's relatively to, the #1 seed, they got clobbered or something like that. But when you're looking at the entirety of the tournament, I don't think that Fly Me Out had a bad run at all.
Yeah, I think that shows that they're probably going to be competitive, when they get to play other teams later in the tournament.
I hope so, because, that's what we were thinking about. It's, okay, these are the 8th seed coming in, but we've seen these players before a lot of times on live. And we know that they're capable of, extremely high keys, extremely tight execution, and we wanted to look at how it's going to translate to MDI. So I'm still expecting, some big things out of Fly Me Out this weekend.
Yeah, that was still only like one Method NA wipe away from victory, which is,
true.
there have been many teams that have had something go, like where something has gone really wrong for the Method NA or Method EU, and then the Method team was able to still win despite having a big mistake there. It looks like Fly Me Out is going to hold them here in this series to needing their runs to be really good to compete, which is awesome.
Yeah, and that's kind of what you need to have, at least. When we talked earlier about map bans of, well, you don't really want to ban something that you practiced on, because even though the other team might be better at it, you're one death or one wipe away from being able to overtake them.
Yeah, which just goes to show, like, even if maybe you aren't pulling as big as your competitor, if you play cleanly and consistently, Nagura, really that can be the difference between winning and losing.
Most definitely. I mean, we've seen it happen lots of times already, where one team had a slower time in time trials, and if both of the teams would have played cleanly, then one team would have clearly won. But because that faster time also requires you to do more riskier pulls in general, and therefore lots of things can go wrong, and sometimes some small mistake on a pull, on these big pulls as we've seen, like for example in this Matter load where you do this Peacekeeper pull, if that pull goes wrong, all of a sudden you lose up to 2-3 minutes of your time, and then the other team, if they just play their strategy cleanly, they're gonna win. So I think it's a good idea to not ban time trials just because of this very reason.
No, it certainly makes sense. And now we are going to be moving on to Underrot, and those affixes are Tyrannical, Teeming, and Bolstering. And these new affix combo this week, what are some of the difficulties that we may see coming out of this next game here, Dranos?
So with Teeming and the Underrot in general, you're really incentivized to do these big Death Knight pulls and pull trash onto bosses and blow it up that way. Bolstering throws a huge wrench into that plan where you can't realistically pull trash onto bosses anymore. And you need to be careful if just pulling a bunch of trash all by itself, even without any bosses, because if one thing or two things live too long, you're going to have a lot of bolstering stacks, and it may have been faster to do just a medium-sized pull instead. So that's where we've seen teams come up with a couple different answers to this. Some teams are still trying to make double Death Knight work here, and are really going all in on to having that perfect execution of those big pulls to get the bolstering managed well, and then taking slightly slower boss times, but doing it in fewer trash pulls. Some teams are playing all hunters instead, or two hunters, and those teams are focusing on a kind of medium pulling pace that is designed to be good at both single target and big pulls, and then some teams are kind of hybridizing those two strategies. So we'll get to see which these two teams have decided for this map.
Yep, and we will soon find out as the game is starting soon. They are both loaded into Underrot. It is Method NA versus Fly Me Out 1-0.
All right, and let's bring out our hunters. It's bolstering time as Method NA and Fly Me Out are both, wow, Method NA is just grabbing even more than I was expecting right now.
Yeah, huge pull coming out of both teams. Actually, we see someone getting really diversified going down, unfortunately, for Fly Me Out. Did get hit by the Matron frontal cleave, which does huge amounts of damage. Didn't manage to out-heal it and went down, but thankfully the release spawn is right there, so he did manage to get back. But yeah, Method using their Bloodlust to get that 13% trash on their side. Fly Me Out struggling a little bit as they bolstered this Blood Priest quite a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, I think the Blood Priest's heal got off, so it ended up having everybody switch targets again. And okay, they did interrupt it. Okay, it looked like she was about to heal once more, and that was gonna be an absolute disaster if true. But Method NA higher on trash, already pulling the boss. Looks like Fly Me Out is gonna be skipping past this Matron pull with Shadow Meld. Okay, I was looking to see where that was going because it looked like they almost just face pulled.
Yeah, so Zephyr unfortunately going down as they're doing their skip.
Oh no!
And is going off as well. Very unfortunate as this spirit, they didn't manage to get the melt off in time, the shadow melt, and therefore the full AoE from the mask just one-shot everybody. Even on a non-fortified setting here, that's a lot of damage. But they did manage to get the Master Race now up on everyone. But yeah, this is going to cost them a lot of time. They also had to commit the Battle Rest to make sure that they are on the other side. While Method NA, no trouble at all. They have one death on their side. Did not have to use the Battle Rest though.
Yeah, that's an absolute disaster scenario there on the side of Fly Me Out. Just probably the worst start that you could really have at that point, where the mask is going off, full wipe, battle res down, just... That's gotta just be killer for, you know, the morale, killer for your momentum as well, especially when you're trying to be able to come back and make sure you're hunting Method NA, you know, even just chasing behind them to make sure that you're in that position. But they're not terribly far behind, as they do end up using their Bloodlust on boss to be able to start trying to catch up at some point. But Method NA, boss is done, and they're getting ready to move on into Kragma's room.
Yeah, so I'm interested to see what kind of pulls Method NA is doing in this Kragma room, because Method NA posted the fastest time in Underrot by quite a bit as well, and the time that they posted makes me wonder what they're really pulling with this bolstering affix, and it looks like they're pulling everything in front of Kragma's room, with a bunch of Bloodswarmers in here as well, so definitely want to make sure to be careful, as Yoda has a double fixate on him, unfortunately.
That's right, he's got to really watch for that. I love how they're, you know, slow rolling it, they're taking advantage of Binding Shot here, making sure that they can get the Bloodswarmers focused down first. That way they're not having any of them, and that's an incredibly chonky maggot right there, as he's just gigantically bolstered. Same thing with the Lashers there too. Let him run!
Oh my god, it's so big. There we go. Did manage to finish it off. And yeah, it's just one thing to note about their comp. They are running Double Hunter DK, which makes these pulls quite a bit more difficult, just because you're missing quite a lot of single target control. The amount of single target control that maybe a Demon Hunter or a Rogue would bring. They don't have that many single target interrupts compared to a full melee group. They don't have a lot of single target interrupts and stuns like a Rogue would bring. They don't have that many single target interrupts compared to a full melee group. They don't have a lot of single target interrupts and stuns like a Rogue would bring with an Outlaw Rogue. So they definitely want to make sure they deal with those frontal casts from the maggots properly. They deal with the interrupts on the Lashers properly as well.
Yeah, looks on the side flying out. They're missing some of the interrupts on maggots, as we see Verse and more DPS going down. Almost going down and Suffer. So Asna and Verse going down, but the stun goes out on to Suffer, as those mobs are incredibly bolstered, and they're just kiting for their lives.
Yeah, I mean, lots of travel here and Fly Me Outside. This is a time trial dungeon, so theoretically those teams should be practiced quite a bit on here. But the thing with time trials is that the teams might take a riskier strategy in those dungeons compared to the cup dungeons, just because in the time trials you actually have 5 tries to pull off your time. So even if you mess up 3 or 4 of your dungeons, you can still do one prep. It just does not work out in that cup.
Possibly. I think part of it is also the scarcity of, you know, time. When you only have so much time to be able to practice, having one strategy for time trials and then trying to adjust it for cup play, I feel like there's just too much of a commitment by a lot of these teams. You know, either it works consistently enough for them or it doesn't.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. Method NA on their side did now engage Kragma as they finished off all of the trash in Kragma's room. They're now up to 65% trash, while Fly Me Out unfortunately only managed to get to 30% with the amount of trouble they had on their trash pulls. Method NA, of course, can't pull anything on top of Kragma because of that bolstering affix. We've seen some teams pull trash at the end of a boss fight on top to get some more efficient time. But Kragma, especially on a Tyrannical environment, you probably don't want to do that just because of the amount of damage that this Tantrum does.
Yeah, the Tantrum damage is quite big. We saw a number of times, I believe it was last season, with Quaking as well. There's some Tyrannical Quaking business dropping people down without really much chance for anybody to be able to react to it. So great job here, making sure everybody's spread out and still just dropping Kragma down. And it's kind of a weird, like, slow moment that we get into as well, looking at this boss with how up-tempo we see it out of Method NA. We're like, okay, now they pull the boss. And we wait.
Yeah, I mean, the trash definitely is going to be much more difficult for those teams to deal with because of the amount of trash they pull on top of each other. Fly Me Out, unfortunately, having 2 deaths again on their side. Just too much bolstering stacks going out. And
a lot of the mega kicks as well. Like, this is multiple times now that they've just had people not have the stops that they're used to, and maybe it just goes to show how important, you know, Rogue can be in so many situations where they have as many stops as you really could want for any of the maggot packs.
I actually really wonder why they chose to bring Demon Hunter, because the Demon Hunter, I mean, yeah, it gives you the magic damage buff, but they're running double Hunter, right? So
Yeah.
they don't have an Unholy who would be benefiting from it. And Versify, as far as I'm aware, likes to play Rogue in most other dungeons, right? So wouldn't maybe the Rogue be better to have all of these interrupts? I'm not really sure what the purpose here is exactly for that Demon Hunter. I'm sure there is a purpose, but I can't really think of one right now.
Yeah, I think there's been some struggle on the side of Bursting. We saw him get cleaved early on, didn't use Netherwalk to be able to, immune through that damage there. He just took the death. We've seen a number of really quick and early deaths throughout this, and it just seems like it's okay, but when we're looking at the top teams in the world, right, when we're looking at the fastest possible dungeons and a lot of pressure on these guys to multi-class as well, it seems like there's got to be something else to be, bringing to the table, something else that will make it absolutely worthwhile for them to do. So I agree, it's just a little bit of a weird one on that one. But at the end of the day, 72% on trash, or 71 right now, excuse me, and they are dealing with Urgrot the Breaker, so that'll probably be the only obelisk that they deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen some teams deal with all 4 obelisks on the last boss, but definitely very difficult to do, specifically because it also is Tyrannical, and the last boss does quite a bit of AoE damage on top of also having that frontal cast, which removes some parts of the room that he can't stand in. So definitely difficult to deal with all 4 obelisks here, specifically in Underrot. And it also is not as efficient as it is in other dungeons, just because of the fact that you need 100% enemy forces before you can even access the last boss. So therefore you don't really get as of a big efficiency from that percentage as well.
Yep, we're seeing another large pull this side of Method NA, as many of those fixates were going out of Yoda, but he's able to hang in there, deal with the damage like a pro, and they've just crushed those Bloodswarmers that they brought in. As there's a lot of Bloodswarmers flying on the right side as you're going down this hill, and you can grab a couple extra ones for trash, and it's such a efficient percentage that they're adding to the table right now, as they're almost done. They do have one of the ads, I believe it actually got raised deaded.
Yeah, I think so as well.
That's a term. It was spawned by the raised dead ability. There we go. So they're just gonna trap it, probably shadow meld it later on whenever they get it, when everybody can get it off cooldown. And overall, very well played by the side of Method NA, and goes to show power of Night Elves. They can start, getting out of these bad scenarios of, okay, a cast accidentally went off. We don't have to deal with this ad anymore because we can just, feign death, shadow meld, we're set.
Yeah, definitely well played to use your Shadow Melt here to not having to deal with that bolstered Guardian there. And then you also don't have to use your Interrupt to get rid of that raised stat, right? You can make sure you focus your Interrupts on the more important casts from the Defilers, the Shadowbolt Volley and the Withered Curse that reduces your damage done, as well as your increases your damage taken. So definitely want to make sure you interrupt those. And it looked a bit scary there at the end of the pull, because those Defilers were quite a bit bolstered, but they did manage to get out that Ring of Peace to do some last minute interrupts, and then the interrupts from the Hunters came back up. So well done dealing with that trash pack, as they now have their Bloodlust available, but it's very likely that they will save it for that last boss for the Awakened mobs as well.
Yeah, and running with these double hunter compositions just goes to show how much they have to do with less resources, right? Being careful for any of the maggot casts, not having as many interrupts for the Defilers as they generally would, right? We're going to see it on the last boss as well, when they have to deal with, the caster mob from the obelisk, right? They have to be able to deal with these different things with less resources, and in many cases, just kind of, you need to kill it before it obliterates your team.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know the struggle of having a long cooldown on your interrupt with the Moonkin. And whenever I join a team and they want to play with the Void Weaver in the last boss, all of a sudden you need to deal with lots of casts going through, and it definitely can be a struggle. Of course, the cast from the Void Weaver will not straight up one-shot you, as long as you're full HP, but it's still a lot of incoming damage, and if there's anything else happening, it can definitely kill you. And on top of that, they don't have a Curse Dispel, which means that the cast speed from the healer will be lower, which can also cause some issues. So definitely difficult pull to do with the last boss, as Method NA now is about to finish off Sancha. They're on 88% trash. Flying Out doing a little bit better now, as they didn't have any more deaths, but they're still very slow dealing with some of the trash. 67% now, quite a bit behind compared to Method NA, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's just been a series of continued mistakes on the side of Fly Me Out. You know, early wipe right to a failed Shadow Meld skip. We're just seeing extra chip deaths here and there, causing more and more problems. And Fly Me Out just lost its momentum really early on, and they kind of like got punched in the gut very quickly throughout this dungeon, and haven't really been able to put it together, and haven't been playing to the level I think where we really we know that they're capable of as well. That's always the challenge when you look at so many teams in the MDI is that they're full of very skilled players, but they also have to translate that into competitive play, into tournament play, and they need to be able to execute on game day.
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes when you're the number 8 seed and your very first game is against the number 1 seed, and maybe there's a dungeon in the map pool in your first series that you never have to play again in another series, then maybe you just decide, you know what, we're just not going to practice this one too much, because we're only going to have to play this against Method NA, and the chance of us winning against Method NA might be pretty low, because they are the best team. So maybe they just focus all their practice time onto other maps, other dungeons that they have to play maybe in the lower bracket afterwards. So definitely a possibility that Fly Me Out maybe did not re-practice this Underrot, which again was a time trial dungeon, but sometimes you just take those riskier strats and you don't have time to re-practice.
Sure. We did see one of the Gnashing Terrors get spawned on the side of Method NA, but great by JB to make sure he drops back, gets the paralysis up onto it, and that's really all that he has to worry about at that point, as they'll be able to port down once they reach 100% trash percentage, and that mob's not going anywhere, so it's not going to be following them.
Yeah, and
it's in the ground. Okay, okay, great. Good talk.
Alright, so they are about to finish up those co-raptors. Moving on, as they wait for that gate to open. Again, you need 100% trash before this gate even opens, so they will still deal with those 3 awaken mob. As you can see, the eye with the number 3 on top of the enemy forces is the number of obelisks that they didn't deal with. So those 3 awaken mobs will be spawning as they engage this last boss. They will give them enemy forces, but already on 100%, so they will go a little bit over percentage. But that is just how it's going to be in Underrot.
Sometimes it's just the way it is,
It is how it is.
Yeah, things will never be the same on this one. But Underrot, last boss going up, Bloodlust on their side, and we're looking at how they're going to be focusing down any of these obelisks. Usually we see Samrek the Beckoner going down first for this team. For most teams, really, just having to get rid of that fear cast as quickly as you can. Having the early revival to make sure everybody has a bit of time to get their cooldowns up and start blasting a lot of these mobs is always amazing to bring to the table. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to see any diffuse magic dispels, because it'll be reflecting the effect, putting it right underneath the obelisk mob at that point, and that's pretty bad when Samrek the Beckoner likes sitting inside the tank's hitbox.
Yeah, and Void Weaver actually not being focused down by them, as they focused Samrek first, then the Droplet, and then Void Weaver. Now, one thing to note about the Void Weaver interrupts, if you do have 2 hunters and DK plus tank to interrupt, you should be able to interrupt almost all of the casts. But preemptively, even when you have an interrupt ready, you can preemptively just let a cast go through if it's on one of your players that have a defensive ready, right? So, because you know that at some point you'll have to let a cast go through, and if that one is on on your healer that is low, or maybe on a damage dealer who does not have a defensive ready, then that will be much worse than if you just let a cast go through preemptively on your healer that is low, or maybe on a damage dealer who does not have a defensive ready, then that will be much worse than if you just let a cast go through preemptively on a player that has maybe AMS ready or Turtle ready, and can just have it be a non-issue, basically. So sometimes we see casts go through even with interrupts ready, just because of that fact.
Yeah, we'll even see a lot of times, if the effect ever goes on the tank, they'll more than likely have Spell Reflect ready to be able to deal with it there. So I really like what they're doing as well from the Hunters. It's a little thing right here, but those are sometimes the littlest things are the biggest things. We've seen the Hunters preemptively clearing out a lot of those spores, and it's not extra pad damage, but it's controlling the spores and making sure that they're not getting in front of the team. So they're always having them sit behind the team, and even you're seeing right now with the side of Lighty, very good instincts on this one to make sure that he's moving just a bit ahead of all of the spores so that they're not really catching up to them. And Method NA taking that quick 2-0 with another strong time in Underrot.
Yeah, this is a best of 3 series, so they only needed 2 wins to send Fly Me Out to the lower bracket, and we will see that game play out earlier today. This is a double elimination, and well done by Method NA and Fly Me Out as well.